Let's take a look at some information and charts on Litecoin for Brave New Coin. So Litecoin is a Bitcoin fork with 4 times eventual total supply, a block time that is 4 times less than BTC, so 2.5 minute block time. Here's the hash rate and difficulty over the past few years. Not too much has happened. In August 2019, they had their block reward halving, and since then, in general, hash rate has been flat. Now, Litecoin and Dogecoin are merge mined, which means if you're mining one, you're mining the other. Up until 2021, Doge essentially was kept alive through script merge mining with Litecoin, whereas now you could argue that Doge, with the price being where it's at, is the reason why hash rate goes up and down here relative to Litecoin. Most of the mining rewards are Doge if you're mining script coins as a percentage. So the Litecoin hash rate is basically at the mercy of Dogecoin prices at this point. If we look at script coin profitability, they're rather high relative to a lot of other stuff. And there's even new script ASICs coming towards the end of this year with extremely high profitabilities, especially if Dogecoin prices stay where they're at. Now, I don't know if this calculation includes both Doge and LTC or just LTC. I assume it includes at least Doge because these are all highly profitable at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. If you look at the miner revenue for LTC and Doge, LTC in the red, Doge in the green. So total per day, we're talking 4 million USD currently. And as a percentage, 75% of that is Doge. So the reason to mine script coins isn't Litecoin for most people, it's definitely Dogecoin. Looking at issuance of a proof of work chains annually, the inflation rates are, for the most part, for the older stuff now, definitely below 5%. LTC at 3.8, Doge at 3.8, Grin at 10x that, Grin at 38. I talked about Grin earlier this week. So unless you're a productive asset or yield generating asset, it's going to be hard for me to want to buy and hold something like Zcash, which I can add here, which has a 11% inflation rate, right? Over LTC, over Dash, over any of this stuff down here, unless you think Zcash has growth potential. So that's one benefit to LTC, is it's been around quite a long time for a proof of work coin. It's survived. Its inflation rate isn't 2%. It isn't Bitcoin's inflation rate. It isn't 1.3%, but it's better than a lot of stuff. Total nodes on the network over 1,300, most of which look like they're updated to the latest version, and most of which in the US, Germany, and France. So no big China footprint here anymore in the node department. And for the rest of the on-chain analytics, a lot of this is going to be colored by Lightbringer, this blockchain game on Litecoin, which will goose all of the on-chain stats. It's going to make everything look better than it is. I'm not saying it's not bullish. I'm not saying the game is crap. I'm just saying the on-chain stats are different than they ever were now compared to any time previously in history, because we have this new entity on the chain. It looks cool. I haven't played it, but that's what it is. It's a game. Lightning stats haven't really changed, but the network does have Lightning capabilities, does have SegWit. And if we look at just the transaction counts, basically at all-time highs, 157,000 per day. This initial spike was Lightbringer, the game, causing this. This previously was Bitcoin transaction spillway when Bitcoin transaction fees skyrocketed. And currently, this is all just fueled by the game, in my opinion. I think if you were to look at under the hood, you'd see that a lot of this is the game, which is fine. Is it going to add value to Litecoin, the coin? I don't know, but it's doing something for the chain, right? Pop on average transaction values here, and those are declining along with a rise in transaction counts, which is what you typically see. So these are microtransactions or data transactions. These aren't necessarily high value transactions that are influencing this calculation. If we look at unconfirmed transaction counts, mainly held below 750, which for Litecoin is a lot historically. If we look at all the data here that Joho has dating back since 2018, mostly since that game was released, unconfirmed transactions held below 200. Slowly over time, it's getting busier and busier on the chain, which is good. You want a chain to have a use case, right? So it's a start. Here's SegWit usage all time approaching 80% on Litecoin. Without SegWit on Litecoin, we may not have had SegWit on Bitcoin, or it would have took much longer. It was important to get it implemented somewhere to show that it works, to show that it wasn't problematic. It was not controversial to those who were for it, but highly controversial for people who were against it at the time. In the blockchain, block size wars, that resulted in Bitcoin Cash, SegWit 2x shenanigans, all that stuff is ancient history at this point. But years later, it was fine, not a big deal. If anything, transactions are too cheap now, and we'll probably eventually be dealing with that further down the road here. Looking at Litecoin's NVT, it is holding at lows, but again, all this is colored by that Lightbringer stuff. You want to see NVT falling, which is bullish. It's an inverse metric of on-chain activity relative to price, basically market cap. So you want to see this declining over time. Active addresses basically at all-time highs because of that game, probably, if I had to guess, which is fine. Just it's important to know what you're looking at, because in a vacuum you'd say, wow, price is where it's at, but all these on-chain stats are so bullish. Why isn't price moving up? This is a bullish divergence. And it's like, well, you could probably say the same for BSV. There's a ton of like data on the chain, but it's all just like spam, junk, garbage, right? So you kind of have to know what's going on here. Not saying that Lightbringer is spam, junk, garbage, but just keep that in mind. You have to know what you're looking at. MVRV, which historically for most coins tops out at around 2. So a 2x multiple of market cap over on-chain activity. In 2017, it spiked to 3. Most recently, it spiked to 2.5. Currently, it's at 1.3. So this could go up a significant amount, but it's definitely not in a buy zone, which would really be like below 1, below 0.5. In 2015, it got below 0.2, 0.1 there. So it's basically just telling you when is the chain worth too much relative to on-chain activity. So it's sitting in a decent spot currently for upside. And if you look at block sizes in the line here, again, the game, the Lightbringer game is going to affect block sizes here. So that's increasing, and fees are holding at their lows. And again, just to compare this to BSV, block sizes on BSV at all-time highs, but when you look under the hood, it's all just spam. So you'd think, oh, this is bullish, people are using the chain, right? But no, it's not the case at all. So just keep that in mind. And taking a look at the Litecoin GitHub, I love to do this, even though Charlie Lee himself has said, there's no activity here. There's not going to be activity here. These are all just merges. They're done sort of off GitHub and then just added. They have Mimblewimble eventually coming, maybe. They have block extensions eventually coming, maybe. Is that going to be enough to move the needle for Litecoin against the onslaught of everything else in the ecosystem? I don't know. Am I glad we're having these experiments on a coin that is not Bitcoin? Yes. Just like SegWit, to me, block extensions and Mimblewimble are much more controversial, at least block extensions, than SegWit ever was, because block extensions are basically a black box where stuff can happen in a sidechain and then is merged with the main chain, and the stuff that happens in that black box doesn't necessarily follow the consensus rules. At least that's the fear and the possibility of the main chain. So if they can implement that in a successful way, maybe it gets attacked, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but that'll just be an interesting experiment to see play out. Another ancillary thing for Litecoin is the Grayscale, not ETF product, but Pink Sheet product, which last month had a premium of 520%. That's gone basically to zero because unlocks are happening over the past couple of weeks here, and premiums will probably never be that high ever again. Premiums will probably go negative here. ETC negative 37% below spot. Both ETH and BTC approaching negative 20% eventually, but the hope here for BTC is it's converted into an ETF. That'll probably pave the way eventually for an ETH ETF. And this other stuff, I don't know if it'll ever get an ETF, but the insanity on the LTC premium is over for sure, probably forever. Looking at Litecoin Google trends, basically sitting back at lows. If we look at just in the past year, down significantly from those highs, so not exactly bullish for price in that department. Looking at the technicals, starting with the 2-year MA multiplier on Poloniex, they probably have the most data other than BTCE, which doesn't exist anymore. But trading started in Polo in 2014 for LTC. Again, one of the oldest coins in existence still today. And this is the 2-year MA. This is 5 times the 2-year MA in the red, and then the white line is the midpoint between the two. Historically, you can see buy zone, sell zone, essentially reached the sell zone here on the recent run up, essentially reached close to that buy zone on the dump. It's funny, it went both directions in like 2 months, but current upside is around 520. So let's say this thing keeps moving up. That's where I'm a seller again. If I was holding this, and I'm a buyer again, anything sub 95, it looks like, just on a high time frame scale. On the daily 5200, yearly pivots, VPVR, and RSI. We do have a bull cross pending here over the next couple weeks. We are trying to reclaim yearly pivots as support. And I like 200, 270, 350, 420. You know, those are the levels, the ladder to climb on the way up if this thing has another run. Here's how it's performed since the halvening. Not super bullish, right? You couldn't really point this to anywhere on the chart and say, yes, that's where the halvening happened. Didn't really affect price, even long term. This thing kind of just went with everything else in October to May and dumped with everything else post May. So not really having a mind of its own in that department, but it does look decent for upside eventually. The LTC USD cloud is painting a textbook edge-to-edge trade from current price to 250, 260. So that's the setup. The stop loss is around 140, 135, somewhere down here. You don't want anything below the Kijun, below the cloud. That would negate the trade, cancel it, invalidate it, however you want to think about that. But the take profit target is definitely at 250, 260. Many coins have already reached this target, BTC, ETH, so those equivalent targets have already been reached. LTC, a bit of a laggard in that department, but the trade still stands on the table. A similar setup for LTC, BTC on the weekly was in the cards a few weeks ago. It looked like it was going to actually happen and then got swiftly denied. So just personally, what would you rather hold, LTC or BTC? Even a mixture seems a bit silly. I see LTC personally as a testnet for BTC, so it's not really something I want to invest in per se, especially given the option between the inflation rates. Where's the party going to happen? Probably BTC. So it makes sense that this thing is basically back to all-time lows against BTC. I don't really see anything in the near term that can save this. Maybe a multi-month W. I don't know. There's no bullishness here. And speaking of no bullishness, LTC ETH just cruising at all-time lows on the weekly. Doesn't care about the mean reversion. Doesn't care that it's a million light years away from the moving averages. It is just, devastation on this chart. There's a bull div here. But again, what would you rather hold, LTC or ETH? Fundamentally, people are using ETH and doing stuff with it, right? You may not agree with it. You may think yield farming is a scam. You may think NFTs are a scam. That doesn't matter. The numbers speak for themselves, right? LTC's got a game, and that's kind of it for most people. Whereas ETH has developers, it has people doing stuff and things, and the fundamental metrics are just heavily on ETH's side relative to LTC. So the weekly looks catastrophic. This thing could just probably, keep going, and the daily as well. This is not anything I'm willing to step in front of. Even to rotate out of ETH into LTC, I think is silly, because since 2019, this thing has just been mega doom. Mega doom, nothing but death. No hope. The winner here is ETH, at least in the near term. That's all for this one. Let me just mention ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio. I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme non-finance, non-custodial portfolio management tool, where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see AUM, performance, allocation, all of the coins I'm in on the DeFi side of things, all the vaults I'm in Yearn, the trades I make, when, for how much, where, deposits, withdrawals, all that fun stuff. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.